Or introductions.
Want to go around and do a round of introductions, or you feel we're good?
I don't know, is anybody out there in the internet world want to introduce themselves? John and Justin.
Yes.
Okay.
It's on the front desk.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Grade 8, is that a quorum?
We're wishy-washy with quorum.
Okay.
We don't vote. We don't vote
We
on
did a real voting online
it.
anyway.
Online. Yep.
Okay, so the presentation tonight is the 2015 Metropolitan Transportation Plan draft presentation by Justin.
Yeah. So one more month where you guys get to listen to me talk for the bulk of it. I'm sure you're all glad about that. But we've talked about this quite a bit over at least the last year and a half or so. And I'm happy to announce that we're finally at a point where we have a full document. It's been a long journey to get here. It's a ton of work by the entire team here at Eastgate. So happy to be able to go through this with you. And what I will do is I'll share my screen for the folks that are joining us on. And hopefully you're able to see our website there.
You're getting a lot of mileage out of that picture.
Yeah. So I'll start off by kind of sharing, where you could find the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. If you go under programs, you'll see the drop down for transportation, and we have a special page just dedicated to this process. Right off the top, you'll see a brief description of what the plan is. Big green button is how you access the plan. So you click that, it'll download the PDF and should open for you automatically. But we'll get to that in just a second, because the other big thing that we're doing right now is our public comment period. So starting on Monday, we opened up public comments for our draft plan. That period will run until May. So little over 2 weeks to review the document, get some comments into us. There's some instructions there for if you want to send your comments. We also have a public comment form that you can click and fill out and send over to us with your thoughts. But I want to jump into this document here, and I'll bounce around a little bit, but I think a nice, easy kind of place of reference to start from is our table of contents. Gives us a nice little guidebook here of what we cover. So we talked in the past about what this plan is, why it's important, why we're required to do it, and what it does for us and our local communities. And we say a lot of the same things in the plan. So you'll see here in the introduction, we talk about metropolitan planning, who we are as an MPO, what that means, what we do. We have a lot of references to United States Code and the federal regulations that kind of mandate what we're required to do and the rules that we have to follow. We talk a little bit about the purpose of a metropolitan transportation plan, the fact that it has to have a 20-year or longer planning horizon. So that's why we're looking out to 2050. We talk a little bit about, some of the purposes, what we are mandated to do when developing this. So establish a clear vision for the region's transportation system, identify and prioritize transportation needs. And this kind of goes on and on. I won't, read word for word all 121 pages for you, but just to kind of keep going, we get into the region, talk about, Eastgate is the MPO, the Youngstown kind of metropolitan area. We talk about some stakeholders and other agencies that we work with. And then we talk about relationship to other planning efforts, because this can't just happen in isolation. There are other things happening. There are other groups and organizations doing work. We lean very heavily on ODOT, particularly for this plan, because that is kind of who we report to, at least initially, and our coordination with them. It's important for it to be interlinked. The work that they're doing, the goals that they're setting, it makes sense for us to try and mirror that to a degree that makes sense for our local context. So we look to a plan like Access Ohio 2045, which is the long-range transportation plan for the state of Ohio. And then some other efforts that they have that are integral to kind of our own planning. So Walk Bike Ohio is the state's pedestrian and bicycle plan. Transport Ohio is the state's freight plan. And you know, there's a lot of these themes that come up in our own work as we put together our work programs for each year. Then we get into the federal requirements and guidelines. Like I said, the US Code, the Code of Federal Regulations kind of guide what we have to do as a part of this planning process. So you'll see a couple key notes there under the US Code. The 3C planning process stands for continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive. You'll hear those words a lot. It's very critical that we kind of have a holistic effort at planning and really wrap up a lot of factors whether it's land use or economic development or environmental impacts or equity through our planning process. Like I said before, a 20-year planning horizon. And then this last one here is fiscal constraint, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a bit. But that's essentially saying what all the projects that make it into this plan that look out to the year 2050 have to be realistic by some measure. We can't just plan for an infinite amount of money's worth of projects. It has to be scaled into reality. We have to do some projections on how much funding we're anticipating to receive over that time period and what that can feasibly accomplish for us. So we'll dig into some details about that in a bit. Looking at Code of Federal Regulations, public participation is huge. You'll see how we document that public participation later on in this plan. Performance-based planning, that's how we track progress. That's how we track, our performance measures for this type of work. And then coordination with state and local plans. Obviously, we've already referenced ODOT earlier in this document, and we continue to do that throughout the document as well. And then as you kind of progress through the plan, you'll see a bunch of maps and figures and charts, all providing additional context. But this sets up the next section of the plan, which is our context. So this talks about our area, our geography, our population. A lot of the things that I think a lot of us innately have an idea of, but this puts some data and statistics behind it to have an evidence-based process. Talk about land use. And for those of you that attended a CAB meeting, oh gosh, blanking on the date of when it was, but it was probably late summer, early fall last year. We did a land use exercise to take a look at future land use. Where do people think stuff's going to change? So we went through that process. We also did that with some local officials, and we came up with some future land use data, and we have that plugged in to some of our analysis as well. When we're talking about our population, I think this one really stands out because any of you who have listened to Jim Kinnick talk recently, he tends to say the word repopulation more times in a meeting than I think he's ever said in his entire life. But some of that rings true. So we look at this data in out to 2050, the Ohio Department of Development is projecting our population to drop by over 20%. That's pretty significant. That's a loss of tax base. That's a loss of families. That's a loss of people. What does that do to our housing? What does that do to our economy? What does that do to our ability to retain businesses and a healthy workforce? So as we're going through these planning processes, all of this has to keep ringing true to our mind, and we have to keep going back to it and saying, this is our status quo future. If we continue business as usual, this is where we'll be. So what are the things that we can do to really pinpoint in on quality of life and the metrics that really matter to people to keep them here, to stop them from leaving and to bring new people?
That's.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah, interrupt me at any
when I
time.
got involved in the planning world, the norm was planning was about growth.
Yep.
We're planning for growth. That's what we plan for.
Yep.
And the first one that really looked at it honestly was Jay Williams. You know, and the 2010 plan was the first plan that talked about getting smaller.
Yep.
And so we got a step ahead of some of the other regions, you know, that are in the same boat that we are. Some places that adopt some regional approaches, that's where our kids are gonna go to get opportunities, because that's where they're at.
Absolutely. And the Youngstown 2010 plan, I think, has a lot of hard truths that people needed to accept.
People
Youngstown's
didn't
never
wanna
going to
see
be
it.
180,000 people again. It's very unlikely. But there's a certain point where you decline too far. And we don't want to get to that point to where that really makes day-to-day
Well, that was it.
operations.
Idea was right sizing, was
Yep.
trying to make it, still had 3 hospitals then. We still have a center, still have a university, we still have a lot of assets that bigger cities have, but as soon as people who live in, you know, get married, buy a house in Youngstown, as soon as they can afford it, they move to townships. They don't stay. And then even then, their kids are gonna go to college and go to Nashville.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when Jim talks about this, he's the worst example. He has a son in Columbus and a daughter in Charlotte.
Charlotte, Columbus.
And also, a friend of mine who's deceased now was a realtor. She said, people left this area because of this retire, rehire policy. You know, people retire, then they get rehired for the same job, and there's people that could take that job. And they're experienced, but they don't receive it because so-called they want to save money. Well, in the end, you don't, because people are leaving. And that's one, and also like Youngstown, like the school system. You have to improve on their school system. And that's another quality of life. And has the city of Youngstown adopted the 2010 plan since it came out? You know, have they implemented any of the
And stuff.
Yeah.
We closed down a whole section of the east side, we closed many streets, took down many red lights, and we're becoming a city of 60,000 people. No, as far as, but we still have the same, it's not the same amount of parcels. You know, we still have the same amount of crime, we have the same amount of poverty, all the region has chosen to store all the poor people in the cities of Youngstown and Warren. And that's, you know, and then they complain when we charge 2.75% income tax, because we gotta pay for these people somehow. You know, you gotta pay for the police force, you gotta pay for the fire department. The building stock is getting older and drier and more burnable. You have to, you know, still pay all those bills, so we gotta charge more income tax. That's where, you know, so. And advantage in a lot of ways that this, like the city, when the city does these things, there's a local share that goes into this. And a lot of times the townships, the local share is handled by the county. County is the city too, you know, so we end up paying our local share for them, you know, and they're getting over by leaving. So, you know, well, I solved the Youngstown problem. I moved to Poland. You know, I've heard people say that. Actually, you know, I don't have to worry about Youngstown anymore. I don't live there.
Yeah.
Work here, you're gonna pay 2.75%.
Yeah, and even to kind of this idea of population, you know, we kind of get into this, but there's other factors at play too, like age. We have an aging population, so people my age are having fewer kids. So our replacement rate isn't quite there. So even if I'm not leaving, what's coming after me isn't necessarily replacing the aging population that is. So we're shrinking in a few different key areas, and I think all of these, you know, statistics are come together in a certain point to just keep reinforcing the idea that as we're planning, we have to think about this in a more condensed way, a way that makes sense for fewer people. We can't, I think, have quite as much of an emphasis on the further out sprawl because we're just spreading our dollars too thin. So when we think about these kind of things in the context of a regional plan, all of this needs to come to mind because our taxes are just going to get more spread out and more diluted over the same land area. We're not bringing it in. We'll need to consider it at a certain point. But as we kind of keep going through all of the demographic information, some statistics on language and migration, poverty rate, income, housing, which we'll pause here for a moment because this is an interesting topic. With the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, sometimes called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, it afforded USDOT new language to integrate transportation and land use planning. There's more freedom for us to do work, to look at land use and things like housing. So as we develop our work programs for future years, you'll probably see more products come out of our office that focus on issues of housing. I know one of our efforts right now is to do a regional housing strategy and analysis, where we'll do kind of a market value analysis on the entire region, set some baseline data, and then kind of narrow in on some specific key areas that are ripe for housing investment based on the data that we receive back from that. And I could see that, continuing on. Maybe we take a zoning look at the region. Maybe we're looking more in depth to land use with our partners at the planning commissions of the counties. So this, I think, is a really big piece and really key for this plan this time around because it gives us a lot more flexibility to look outside of just the narrow lens of transportation. It lets us get more holistic in planning. A couple other statistics, travel patterns. This is some interesting chart here. It's a census inflow and outflow job count. So it tracks the number of people that come into the region for work, leave the region for work, and then the number of people that live in the region and work in the region. So I could actually zoom in a little bit here to see these numbers. But you'll see that the lion's share of people live in and work in the region. A little bit less, about half live in the region but leave the region for work. And then even fewer than that live outside of the region and come into the region for work. So all things we need to consider when we're thinking about interregional travel and transportation. This last statistic here is vehicle miles traveled, really just a statistic over time of how much the people in our region travel compared to metrics across the state or the United States as a whole. Which then takes us to this thing called the travel demand model. And this is essentially an algorithm that you plug a lot of data into and it outputs you some metrics that tell you how efficient or how effective your transportation network is. Our partners down at ODOT handle this modeling for us. They can manage this for our region. And a lot of this data that goes in and comes out of this goes into our air quality analysis, which we'll talk about at the very end of the document. But really just some statistics on, commute and some information in that regard. So then we get to the section on goals and objectives. And I think we've hammered this one probably the hardest in our public engagement than any other. So these goals and objectives should be fairly familiar to those of you that have been to some of the past meetings where I've talked about this or even engaged with us to help us develop them. But you'll see that there's 6 here. Last time I presented, last month, we were at 7. And as I was kind of compiling this final document, getting everything in order, tying up everything nice and tight, there was one goal that stood out to me that seemed a little redundant. So I was able to take those strategies and merge them into other goals to kind of simplify our goal structure and make it a little bit more manageable without necessarily glossing over any necessary topic. See safety, preservation, mobility and accessibility, economic competitiveness, public health and quality of life, and environmental stewardship. These goals really came from a few different places. Like I had said, hearing what people's priorities were, kind of reading between the lines and figuring out what the root kind of highest order importance was. We looked to ODOT's Access Ohio 25 plan, looked at their goals so that we could match pretty closely to what they're working toward. Talked with our partners up at Federal Highway Administration to see where the federal administration's priorities lie. And then also kind of our neighboring regions to see what they're working on, where their interests are. So up in Cleveland, our sister agency, NOACA, in Akron, it's AMATS, even speaking down to some folks down in Southwest Pennsylvania to look at their plans, talk to them and see how they went through their goal development process and what went into that. And that's how we landed on this. So each goal has two strategies that we get into in this section of the plan where we really call out kind of the work that has been done, some of the baseline information that's important in these areas, and also what could be expected as we develop future work programs in what we are going to work on into the future. So safety, preservation. Preservation is like pavement condition and asset management and things like that. Sometimes that terminology can get minced in a few different areas. Sometimes people have a tendency to think like housing preservation or historic preservation and things like that. Not in this context, but certainly another concept that we'd like to pay attention to, especially on the quality of life side of things. But some more maps and figures and information. I'll try not to make anybody seasick by scrolling too fast. But want to get to one of our goals here, mobility and accessibility. This one's really important, not only for transit, but also pedestrian and bicycle accessibility. We're currently finishing up our bike and pedestrian plan. So that should be out and ready for everyone to take a look at in the near future. A lot of commentary on kind of the work that we've done before and what we plan to do coming up. Talk about public transit, give a picture of what transit is like in our area, what some of the obstacles are to further development in transit, and some of the activities that have gone on there. Transportation demand management is a fancy term for helping people find carpool partners and traveling a different way. So we have a program called Go Ohio Commute that tackles that issue. Shared mobility, there's some energy behind a bike share system in the city of Youngstown. City of Warren has had scooters for quite a while now. So that's popping up in our region. So we wanted to make sure that we paid attention to that. Connected and autonomous vehicles in this section is kind of one of the areas where technology kind of bubbles up. We have technology not necessarily set as an outright goal, but we wanted it to be built in throughout the plan. Because I think technology is one of those things that is pervasive in all categories. It's not going to be a sole focus. It's going to be something that touches everything. So as we look into our planning, we want to make sure we're addressing kind of automation and how that could impact our transportation network into the future. Economic competitiveness is how we tie in kind of our economic development side. So we are an economic development district certified by U.S. Economic Development Administration, which essentially means that we develop a comprehensive economic development strategy for the region. So we have these two kind of comprehensive but siloed plans under our one roof. How do we bridge them together? How do we make one work for the other and then in the inverse? This is our way to tie the transportation side of our agency over to our economic development side. And we talk a lot about freight in particular with this, and I'll mention it a little bit later in the agenda, but there's something called the Live Zone, which is a study that we undertook and is now finished that focuses mostly in the Lordstown, North Jackson region, but wants to look out regionally and see how impacts in development of logistics and manufacturing firms in that area can really impact and kind of be cutting edge technology developments that help us develop good, high quality paying jobs and deliver a high quality of life.
Is this Gerald or Justin?
Yeah, this Justin.
Justin, Phil Pegg, Vina Township.
Yeah.
This whole thing's called the Metropolitan Transportation Plan for 2050.
Correct.
Is there going to be a rural transportation plan? You know, you just started talking about regional, but then you left out 22 townships in Vina Town or in Trumbull County. I'm sure you left out a fairly large amount of townships in Mahoney County. And then you're talking about regional. Well, guess what? The townships are part of regional.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. This plan covers all of Mahoning and Trumbull counties.
But in looking at the maps, and I have not printed the whole thing out because of the number of pages yet.
Sure.
You know, you show those borders of the metropolitan areas, and again, you know, the vast majority of all the townships are left out.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up an excellent point here. And let me pull up the map of the urban area. So I apologize for glossing over this, but this is kind of how, ooh, sorry.
That was it, actually.
Yeah, so this is kind of how the metropolitan planning process works in a way. So every urbanized area that has a population greater than 200,000 people is assigned a metropolitan planning organization. So that red boundary, you'll see those red and blue boxes, but those are just a visualization of the changes in the urbanized area between the year 2000 and 2010. The Metropolitan Planning Organization is then goes through a consideration called a transportation management area. So again, if it exceeds that 200,000 population, your transportation management area are the principal counties within which the urbanized area resides. So our planning capabilities and the funding that we receive through USDOT, through ODOT, into our agency is able to be expended anywhere within Mahoning and Trumbull counties. We have a cooperative arrangement, a memorandum of understanding with Mercer County, since our urban area does reach into Pennsylvania. But instead of having one agency, you know, us or them handle the entire area, we kind of split at the state line because there are partnerships and relationships built within those two agencies that we felt were important to retain and not muddy by having handled by one agency and working across state boundaries. But Mercer County is also included in our TMA. It's just that another agency handles that work for us. But yeah, all of this work gets done for the entirety of Mahoning and Trumbull counties.
Okay. I'll wait for my second part until you get to it. So I'm waiting for you. You're cool.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for asking that question, because I think that's an important distinction all out there. So we'll jump around here. I'll scroll a little bit. There's one goal I want to pay particular attention to. So public health and quality of life. For the last couple of years, Eastgate has been a partner with an organization called the Healthy Community Partnership of the Mahoning Valley. Project, program kind of spun out of the Community Foundation of the Mahoning Valley really focused on 3 areas of public health. One is active transportation, another is healthy food retail, and the third is parks and green space. A part of the work of that organization is really growing the integration of health into other agencies' operations. So for a long time, our lane, at least in this work, is transportation. Transportation is what we do. That's what we look at. We pave roads, we maintain bridges, we do that. But all of these things have a profound impact on how people interact with their communities, with the space around them. So we felt it was really important at this time to start bringing some of this language into our planning. There's nothing in this plan that commits to anything. There's no, policy or teeth to any of this. But we think that it's important enough to make this a high-level goal, so that when we think about how we structure our work, how we put together our products, public health and quality of life really is that important, and that needs to be a core component of the work that we do. So by having this language in here, I think it really will help drive us to create more holistic products, and help us produce work that is more beneficial for improving quality of life, especially as we have these conversations about repopulation and growth and workforce development. So the next one here is environmental stewardship. Obviously, we have an environmental side to our agency. We receive grant funding through US EPA. I work very closely with Ohio EPA to produce some water quality documentation and also operate our 208 water quality management plan, which is mostly the sewer infrastructure. Some of that gets built in, especially in relation to stormwater and some of the stormwater planning we do as it relates to water quality. And we think, again, tying this document to the other regional work that we do at the agency, making sure we have an ability to reach out and pull some of that work in from our environmental side, so that when it comes to resiliency planning, when we're talking about stormwater, or Kevin and I, before the meeting started, we're talking about Pine Avenue that floods all the time. How do we address these issues of environmental concern when it comes to impacting transportation in the region? Also in this section, it talks a little bit about air quality conformity. We are not held to as stringent of standards as other regions that have air quality that is much worse than ours. So we are kind of fortunate in that aspect, but we are not in full attainment of our air quality. So there are still some regulations that we need to follow and proceed through. And I'll talk a little bit about how that will affect this plan at the very end. And then we talk about energy and alternative fuels in this section. So again, technology kind of rearing up. We just produced an EV charging location plan that helps our local communities identify areas that are most suitable to installing chargers, mostly focused on level 2, not necessarily on DC fast chargers, which are currently being taken care of through the state's efforts through the NEVI plan. But yeah, we want to make sure that we're addressing kind of emerging technologies and looking to the future. And again, you'll see land use there. So it's come up a couple times, federal requirements. Not only are we held to federal requirements, but the work that we produce is. Some of these factors that you'll see in this plan or in this section are supporting economic vitality, increasing safety, enhancing security, increasing accessibility and mobility, protecting and enhancing the environment, enhancing integration and connectivity, promoting efficient system management and operation, emphasizing preservation, improving resiliency and reliability, and enhancing travel and tourism. And a lot of those kind of make their way into our goals and strategies. So, or our goals and objectives rather. So again, we built this plan so that as we are going through and we're meeting our federal requirements, they're integrated tightly into our goals of the plan, so that we're lockstep with what the feds and what the state are looking at as well. So to do anything, you need money. So funding is the next big critical part. This first part of the section kind of talks about types of funding. So we outline the funding programs on the transportation side that come through our office, and then also just have a general list of other funding sources through the federal and state levels that many of our local communities utilize and are successful capturing. But what's really critical to this is kind of financial forecasting. So I brought up the term fiscal constraint previously. We need to make sure that we're forecasting in a way that makes sense and is according to some best practices. So we take a look at all the federal and state money that comes into the region over the last 10-year period. We look at federal, state, and local dollars, both for highway and transit. And we come up with an average of what we receive over a 10-year period. That kind of gives us a good ballpark time period to kind of estimate from as a baseline. And we take that average and we apply kind of a growth rate to it. So there's an infinite number of methodologies to utilize for this type of forecasting. The one that we have utilized the last few times we've been through this process is to apply a growth rate just in the near term, the next few years, and then keep our growth flat throughout the out years into 2050. And what this really does is it sets up a very conservative estimate of the amount of funding that we will bring in. And that allows us to not over budget and over plan for the projects that we can complete in 2050. Because if we continuously added a growth rate and projected way more in funding to come into the office through 2050, and in turn, we allowed more projects to be put into the plan, and then we started to not be able to fulfill on our promise. We didn't meet that growth rate over that time period. That's when we start to run into trouble. So you'll see a 2% inflation growth rate added for the first 3 years, and then we remain flat throughout 2050. And we've utilized this strategy the last couple of times we put this document together. Talked it over with our federal and state partners just to make sure that that makes sense is a way to move forward, and got the all clear. So that is our federal forecasting. And then we get into the project. So we have to spend that money now. And the way that this works is about a year ago, I'd say, Stephen from our office, who's our new Director of Transportation and Infrastructure, had put out a call soliciting projects from our local communities. Told all of our local communities, think big about 2050, what the transportation projects you want to see happen over that time period. So we received in the short term, 134 projects totaling $284 million. 18 of those were bike and pedestrian projects, around 21 million. 86 of those projects were in the operation and maintenance category for 190. Bridge projects, there were about 18 for 18 million. And congestion mitigation, a dozen projects for $53 million. And then looking out into the long term, another 50 projects totaling 118 million. So 5 more bike and ped projects, 38 more operation and maintenance, 1 bridge project, and 6 congestion mitigation projects in that long term category there. So we mapped these projects, and you'll also kind of get a preview of some of our environmental justice analysis here, where we overlaid them on low income and high minority census tract areas as a way to make sure that we are not negatively impacting any vulnerable populations as a part of these planned projects. And then this next section, no one will be able to read on the screen, but if you get the digital copy, you can zoom in pretty far and make sense of it all. But this is a listing of all the projects that were submitted through our office. So these are all of the local communities that sent projects into us for inclusion into the plan. The one thing I will note about this project list is it's not final. This document lives from the day it's passed, the next day it could change. This is just our best guess at this point in time. MTPs get adopted or amended all the time to include new projects. You don't have a crystal ball that you could look into and predict the future perfectly. So it is an open and living process that will continue to evolve as new priorities and new projects come to light. So we're almost at the end of the document here, but after funding and after the projects, we get into this section called implementation and monitoring strategy. And this is how we track performance. This is, looking at performance measures that were set as standard by federal transportation policy. They look at safety, congestion reduction, system reliability, environmental sustainability, and reduced project delivery delays. These are things that in our office, through our normal programming, through our transportation improvement program, we're already tracking. We have a performance measures report that comes out that tracks all of the data related to these. And some of this even rears its head in additional planning efforts like our regional safety plan or our transit development plan. But this section of the plan really documents kind of the rules behind each of these measures and what they mean. It pulls in some of the data to show our recent performance in these categories. Jump back again. And then we'll jump down to this air quality conformity. So it's come up a couple times, but this is really the section where we talk about how this works and what this means for us. Essentially, our air quality conformity will occur after the General Policy Board approves this document. So once the document is approved, we will send it off to our state partners at ODOT as well as Ohio EPA, send it off to Federal Highway, Federal Transit, and US EPA to look at our air quality conformity. Are all of the projects that we say are in this plan not negatively impacting the air quality for the region? So they will run their analysis, they'll crunch all the numbers, and they'll come back with an affirmation of that statement. And then after our air quality conformity concludes, our plan is official. It's then put into practice and we can start implementing it as soon as that process concludes.
Justin,
Yes.
question.
Yeah.
Where are they getting the air samples to be judged? Is it the only air quality monitor in the valley, which is south of Youngstown? Obviously, there's none in Trumbull County. How are they going to determine that air quality? Are they going to go from that single location?
So all of this is future projected. There are models, statistical models that they utilize, and then based on the type of project and the type of activity that would occur, they have an algorithm that calculates all of that and provides a report on the impact. But there are more than just one air quality monitor, not to get too sidetracked here, in our region. Hopefully this will pop up.
Okay.
We can get to this on the website.
The
This
document
information.
for the air quality or the?
Yeah, well, air, water, and sewer.
Yeah, on our website, we do have links to all of that.
You're saying there are multiple in the valley?
Yeah, so Trumbull County has 3 monitors. Mahoney County only has 1 in Youngstown. I believe that's at, no, it's saying Youngstown State. That's not where I thought that was, but I could be incorrect.
I thought it was south.
I thought it was at the old Oak Hill Hospital, but I could be mistaken. But there's one, I think this one's on Laird Avenue, Warren. This one is Trumbull County Sanitary Engineer's Office, and then there's one up in Kinsman.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, airnow.gov, great resource if you're ever interested in air quality. You can sign up for email alerts for daily air quality. Just a little pitch there. But to jump back to our environmental justice analysis, again, this is our way, there's some regulations on how we have to proceed with this. There's public outreach, our demographic profiles, the environmental effects that we have to track, and then the analysis of environmental effects. So this is where our low income and our high minority census tracts come in to make sure that the projects that fall in those areas are not negatively impacting them. So we identify all of those census tract areas, we pull out the projects that are in those locations, and then all of those factors that were up here, air, noise, and water, safety, congestion, and aesthetics, natural environment characteristic of existing community, economic vitality, businesses, residents, and accessibility. We go through and we analyze all of the projects based on those characteristics and figure out the impact. So that gets compiled into this report here. And then to take it one step further, we also do this for our public transit projects in the region. So you'll see that for Mahoning and for Trumbull County. But then our Title VI requirements take this a step further. So we look at census tracts that have high populations of people reporting a disability, as well as census tracts of populations with limited English proficiency. So tracking all of this to really ensure that the projects that were submitted to us through our processes are not negatively impacting any of the people that live in our region. So we get to the appendices. Anybody that's been around government knows that it's Alphabet City. There are acronyms left and right. We try and be as comprehensive as possible. In the text of the document, I try and spell out all of the acronyms, at least the first time that we use it. But if you catch one that you can't quite find, it should be in this glossary here for reference. Another thing I wanted to keep in the appendices is we covered the requirements, the federal requirements earlier in the document, but in this section here in the appendices is how our plan actually addresses each requirement. Work that Eastgate is doing on an ongoing basis through our overall work program. So we've got responses to each of those requirements there. And then is our public participation process, which is our full document. It's also on our website, but I won't scroll past that because it is a little bit long. And I'll jump to this next section for documentation of public engagement. So this is where we have to outline, where did we talk about this? Where did we hold public meetings? How did we do that? So all of those dates are listed in there, as well as examples of some of the strategies that we utilize. So, whether it's media releases or social media or local media coverage, this is our documentation that these things occurred during the development of this plan. After kind of the documentation there, any of the public comments we receive from this Monday through May 19th will be included in the plan in this section with responses and how we addressed any comments or concerns that were brought up during this time period. Then we'll include our general policy board resolution after it's signed and approved. And lastly, our FHWA certification letter after the completion of the air quality conformity process. That's the end of the plan. So that's a lot. That's 121 pages.
So final document expenditure approval.
So our general policy board approval will be June 5th. After that, there's a 45-day period for that air quality conformity. So like second week of July should be when it's official.
Then what are you gonna do?
Then we can start doing the work. We got to make all these projects real, or at least some. But yeah, so this document, obviously covers out to 2050. Every 10 years, we complete a new one. So this is a brand new document. We started from scratch and built the whole thing new. In 5 years, we'll come back to this document and do an update. So we'll do a 2050 MTP update in 5 years. So get excited for that. Probably won't be me doing it, but. Any other questions, thoughts?
Justin,
Yeah,
and I'm sorry, Phil Pegg again.
yeah, go for it.
Okay, Niles Vienna Road at State Route 11, you have some type, and again, I can't print all of those pages.
Sure.
What is that consist of, since you have one of those dots on that location? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I do not. I can see if I can try and pick it out of the list here. Oh, this did not get, oh, there we go.
Is that a proposed new interchange between Niles Vienna Road and Route 11?
Hopefully it's not, because both Vienna and Howland has repeatedly opposed it, as we are working against an annexation by the city of Niles. Water from that area runs down across underneath Niles Vienna into a swamp. Well, that would be fine. I guess they could reroute the creek that runs down through there. Then they could cut down the eagle's nest that is overlooking that swamp.
Yeah, taking a quick look, Phil, I'm not able to pick it out of this list, but what I will do is I'll get together with Steve Zubik, who is way more familiar with this project list than I am, and we'll be sure to get in touch with you to let you know what that project is and if you have any other thoughts on.
I would appreciate that. I went through it. I just could not find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Justin, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, it's Pete Milliken. I'm going to try to be brief, and I'm going to even try to watch a second hand here, but I have something that maybe I'll put in writing as a comment on the 2050 plan. We have a declining population here, but we are still a major crossroads of the national interstate highway system, and we need to think regionally. And this idea may go beyond Eastgate into ODOT and the federal government. But as for your Transportation 2050 plan, I think we need a feasibility study on whether Interstate 76 should be widened from 2 to 3 lanes in each direction between the Ohio Turnpike interchange in North Jackson and Akron. Now, this would be a billion-dollar project. That's B-Boy billion. And I don't know if it's practical and affordable or justified by safety, traffic count, and economic development considerations. Anecdotally, there seems to be a lot of traffic on I-76 between North Jackson and Akron. Now, that's my idea, for a big project that starts here in the Mahoning Valley and goes through Portage County and into Akron. Now, that's the big idea, which is something that would have to be planned on a very long-range basis. Now, in the shorter range, I wonder if signs should be posted designating Mahoning Avenue and Talmadge Road as an Interstate 76 alternate route in case of an accident that might close part of Interstate 76. And I say that because Mahoning Avenue parallels Interstate 76 in Mahoning County, and Mahoning Avenue becomes Talmadge Road in Portage County, and that parallels I-76 all the way to Talmadge if you follow that. So you got a parallel road, Mahoning Avenue and Talmadge Road all the way from North Jackson to Akron. And I think we should post that as an alternative route, alternate 76, in case of accidents that close a part of 76. Anyway, I think I'm going to put that in writing as a comment on your 2050 transportation plan, but I just wanted to throw it out there now as well.
Thanks for sharing that, Pete. I know both counties, Mahoning and Trumbull, have hazard mitigation strategies, and part of that is alternate routing for the interstates and highway systems. So I'd venture to guess that may already exist. It just may need formalized, like you're saying, with some signs making that known kind of physically, on the roadway itself.
Yes, they seem to do that fairly well in Pennsylvania. They have color-coded detours near the interstates.
Oh, yeah. And to your other comment, I-76 widening, certainly something we'd pay attention to. If that were to come up, whether it's a local community that is interested in exploring that, or if that's ODOT pushing that, is they're seeing the data on their end. They're the ones that maintain all of those traffic volume counts. But certainly, yeah, something we can have conversations with, even with our partners over in Akron at AMATS. Yeah, and I see Gerald.
Well, thank you, Justin. I think this is a big project. When we have to think big on some things, and this is a long-term thing, and we need a feasibility study to see if the billion-dollar expenditure is justified.
Yep. Any other thoughts or comments on the MTP? I saw Gerald put in the chat, 224 also parallels 76 could be an additional alternate route. So thanks for sending that in.
And that actually, we were coming back from Kenton, the traffic was all backed up and they were routing us. We went and ended up on 224. I mean, we could have 18 probably. Never even thought of Mahoning Avenue. But we were way out by Alliance. We came all the way back on 224 to Canfield.
All right. Well, this might be the last time you hear the letters MTP for a while, but always happy to talk about it. Where if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. Obviously, the comment period runs to the 19th. So if you have thoughts, please send them in.
Okay. Thanks, Justin. I'm gonna.
Yeah, anybody online, if you need a printed copy, Phil, if you ever want to stop into the office, I could print one for you. If the number of pages is prohibitive, please let me know what accommodations we can help make. Anybody in the room, there are a couple copies over there. If you need me to run an extra one, happy to do it. Yeah, I even have a copy someone can grab, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. This is why we're here, really, pretty much. That's why this office is here, is to make these plans and to make sure that everything is considered. It's very comprehensive. So,
Ask a question. Ask a question.
Yeah.
As we're talking about sewer, water, air quality. What is the current status of this? What is our quality when it comes to the sewer system, water system? Where can you get that information
The water department.
for water?
Yeah, water is a bit tougher.
That's wherever you get your water from.
Yeah,
That's,
your
that's
water
where, that's
supplier.
where you gotta, if you get your water from the ground. It's a lot of
That's,
things to do.
yeah, I'm talking about
Well,
some.
somebody else is not.
Yeah, your water department, whoever you receive your water from, should
Yeah,
have.
they send out, they send out a report every so often.
Sending that in one of the things.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
sewer,
And septic, we've got our 208 water quality management plan. That's up on our website. I can bring that up real quick. So under programs, environmental planning, wastewater planning. So you can take a look at, a lot of this information here talks about kind of where sewer is. So the county health department set the septic regulations. So that's included in this plan. But essentially the areas that you see kind of on this handy dandy interactive map will show you where sewer is permitted, where septic is permitted, and then also relates back to our plan based on what regulations and requirements anybody interested in developing a sanitary sewer or septic has to follow. Looks like it's spinning its wheels trying to get up, but
so you can get to it through your site.
yep, on this wastewater planning page, you'll be able to see, not only that interactive map, you could see the wastewater treatment options, which is essentially just the regulations you have to follow in either county. And then more information about our 208 plan. The plan in itself is here. It has quite a few sections on kind of water quality across all different sectors, so or factors. And then the last one, air quality. We receive transportation funding to observe, forecast, and monitor air quality conditions. So those 4 air quality monitors that are in our region, we contract with a firm that does this for us. We don't necessarily have that type of meteorological capacity in-house, but they're doing daily forecasting where, real-time air quality monitoring we could have maybe another presentation another day where I can go into the details of that, but it's really neat. They send out, there's a service called, oh gosh, it's through that airnow.gov. You could sign up for it. It's the emails. And if our air quality gets to a level that is unhealthy for sensitive groups, or even worse than that, it will send out an alert notifying you of the air quality conditions, give you some suggestions on how to manage if you are susceptible to, worsening conditions. And if that causes issues for you, they'll give you some issues. But we're really impacted by a whole lot of factors. Not a whole lot locally contributes to negative air quality. We tend to see our worst days during ozone season, which are the hottest months of the year that we're coming up on. But wildfires from out west, a lot of that smoke carryover will impact our area. Independence Day, notably terrible day for air quality. The day after, July 5th, is always kind of a nightmare because you're just filled with particulate matter and smoke from the celebrations. But in general, our air quality is good. I'd say on most days we're in the good to moderate category. We have very few instances where we reach that unhealthy.
We were glamorizing about the air quality wasn't nearly as good then. And still not. One place where we would improve is air quality. But we don't have as many jobs as we have. For tax dollars to spend on playgrounds and parks. So. Okay, I guess that we can move on to the general policy board report.
Yeah, I'll take general policy board and TAC just in one fell swoop. Policy board is coming up June 5th. I'll coordinate with Genevieve and Samantha to provide the Citizens Advisory Board report, make sure that they're able to attend and give that. If anybody has any comments or any thoughts that the CAB should include in that report, as always, reach out to me and let me know. I'm happy to have that conversation. And then today at our technical advisory committee, we kind of had a condensed meeting today because we had a consultant come in to provide a presentation. So really it was just myself that I went over the 2050 MTP, much like I did here, and had a conversation with the folks there. And then Mark Ragazine gave an economic development and broadband update. Really on the economic development side, there are 7 successful ongoing EDA awarded projects in our region right now, which is statistically unheard of. An incredible amount of money coming in from the EDA into this area. So we've been very lucky and very successful in helping our communities access that type of funding and level of funding. And some of that is due to the increases seen through ARPA or some of that COVID money that came into various government departments to increase programmatic funds. On the broadband side, just an enormous amount of activity as well. There's projects in Ashtabula, Trumbull, and Mahoning County all over. The largest effort right now is we are conducting an engineering analysis on a middle mile fiber backbone down Route 11 to connect the lake to the river. So that engineering analysis should wrap up sometime this month. I'd love to be able to get some information passed on to this group related to that. I know I want to get Mark and Steve Kristen, who is our broadband consultant, back into here to give an update on all of the developments going on in the broadband world. We helped Ashtabula County apply for a federal ARC power grant to provide fiber to the home and to businesses in the southern and eastern portions of Ashtabula County. We're working with Trumbull County right now in the city of Niles to look at the feasibility of a fiber loop there. Also the tough rows of townships in Trumbull County, looking at some wireless broadband deployment with some partnerships with some folks that put some equipment up on towers and are able to broadcast broadband wirelessly to provide access and affordable options to folks that may not have it. In a similar solution, maybe in Mahoning County, where we have a partnership with a firm called Ice Miller that's helping us engage some partners that do this work all across the country. Really divide. So a lot going on there. I'll definitely be sure to have them in for a meeting to provide an update because they can speak at depth and way more eloquently about it than I can. But lastly, at TAC, we had a presentation from a firm called Michael Baker International, who conducted our Live Zone study, which is the Logistics Innovation and Vehicle Electrification Zone Vision and Action Plan. This was a study that started out as something called the Lordstown Smart Logistics Hub, but has really grown in scale. They took a look at kind of the investments being made at the repurposed GM Lordstown plant, where Foxconn and Lordstown Motors are. A lot of the other investments related to the logistics industry, where there's some really kind of just booming business out there in great growth. So how do we facilitate that? How do we find out what their needs are? How do we kind of maximize what's possible? So there's projects that come out of this report that range from smart intermodal facility yards that are all autonomous, that are able to take freight cars off of trains and transfer them onto trucks. There's I guess like smart staging areas or kind of like trailer decoupling zones where you're able to run these triple trailers on the turnpike. But when you get to the local roads to get them to their final destination, you have to really break them down into individual vehicles. Right now, there's some issues with where our truck zones are. So there's some solutions to some of those problems. There's considerations for energy, electric and autonomous vehicles. There's a transit component to that work, and it all ties into kind of maximizing the economic potential in that area. So really exciting plan. It is on our website. I'll keep going back to this. This one I believe is under projects. Yeah, transportation and infrastructure, live zone. And you can see the vision and action plan is this link here. It'll pull up a PDF of the document. There's a really easy read together in a way that is easily comprehensible and understandable. And the last portion of that plan is really implementation. So they went into the details of how to make it real. How do we phase this out in a way that doesn't overly burden our local communities and we get a benefit out of it. So that is all we covered at the Technical Advisory Committee meeting today.
Okay. Now, next item on the agenda is board discussion.
Nothing from last meeting to discuss, so nothing here unless anybody has anything new.
Any resolutions,
No resolutions.
questions and comments? You said something in an email about we can go to the 50th anniversary annual meeting.
Yeah, just respond to that email and let me know if you're able to make it.
Just respond to it.
Yep. Yeah, May 17th, we have it listed as 8 to 1 p.m. But essentially that 8 to 9 hour is breakfast and networking. And then the 12 to 1 is lunch and networking as well. So the bulk of the program is between 9 and noon. So not a whole lot of time out of your day, but we've got a great program. We'll have representative, his name's Matthew Chang, who helped work on the Live Zone project, kind of be our keynote speaker. We'll have a panel discussion with Ellen Hines from USEDA, Mark Winchell from the Ashtabula County Port Authority, and Mayor Doug Franklin from City of Warren.
Okay. Any announcements other than?
I included a few links there, a lot of kind of what's been mentioned already. One thing I did receive is from Genevieve. There is the Trumbull County Ohio State University Master Gardener Volunteers Annual Plant Sale on May 20th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. It looks like that takes place at the Trumbull County Agriculture and Family Education Center. I'll put that information in kind of the meeting summary so everybody has access to that. You can go get yourself some plants.
Plant sale,
Yeah,
they're not free.
not free.
If you know someone who's interested in our position,
Yeah, still open. We're hiring a transportation planning associate with Ken Simpson retiring and Steven Zubik taking his role as Director of Transportation and Infrastructure. We need someone to kind of backfill the work that he was doing. A lot of that is with our transportation planning, our funding programs, and the transportation improvement program. So not necessarily looking for someone with direct experience, but just looking for someone that has kind of the right personality to be able to pull off that type of work. So if you know anybody looking for a job, we'd love to have them.
okay. And with the annual meeting, May 17th. In the auditorium, we talked about it. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Second.
Next month. Will we meet next month?
So yeah, no meeting next month. One thing before everybody leaves and before you all log off, I want to kind of gauge some interest. The July Technical Advisory Committee has been canceled. It fell on July 6th. The committee felt that they didn't have much to discuss that month and didn't want to run into issues with attendance for July 4th holiday. I'm willing to still have the CAB if you all feel like you want to show up July 6th. If that's not an issue for anyone, we'll kind of proceed as planned. But open to ideas otherwise. Cool. Cool. So yeah, we will meet next July 6th. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. That was, very, shows how much work you do, Jeff.